Welcome everyone to Ask Your Doctors. I am your host, Dr. K, and that is just my AKA. In real name, I am Dr. Komet Mukwili. I'm a dentist, but I am pretending to be a TV host, hopefully for the future. I'm looking for a job in this thing. Welcome. Now, today is another interesting topic, and I can't wait as a heterosexual male, I think for now, to hear more and learn about life as a transgender, because information, and stories, beautiful stories and more beautiful stories is what you need to hear in order to enlighten you and make you a human being that's going to live well with other human beings, because I would like to learn more. In any case, none other than Claire Slabbert, who is our guest today, who is a transgender. And Claire, hello.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm very well, thanks yourself.
All right, thanks. Welcome. You don't look nervous at all.
Not at all.
You're a natural. Yeah. Oh, okay. And thanks for making the time.
Thank you.
And I said beautiful stories. And off air you said, not all beautiful, I know, but I want beautiful stories. I have the emotions of a 6-year-old. I'd like to be reassured all the time. So tell us beautiful stories. Tell us your background. Tell us where you come from. Tell us your little journey with being a transgender, and I'll ask you more in-depth questions as we go along.
Sure. Where to begin? Let me just fill in currently. My name's Claire. I'm an electrologist. I do electrolysis
How do
hair
you say
removal.
that?
Electrologist.
Yes.
I do electrolysis hair removal, and I specialize in transgender clients.
Okay.
Just to correct you, someone isn't a transgender, they are transgender.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
It's a
I
statement,
said I'll learn a lot
not a
today.
noun.
I'll learn a lot today.
Yes, I have a background in live concerts and audio engineering. I am a search and rescue volunteer, and I've had a very long background as far as owning tactical stores and things like that. My history starts, born 82, give away my age, Kempton Park Hospital. Back in those days, I was born intersex, somewhere on the scale of everything isn't 100% perfect with chromosomes and hormones and what. Growing up, I said something to Dad. This was not the time, this was not the period where this was easily accepted. So that didn't go very well. Many years later, again in puberty, said something to Dad again. Again, did not go very well. And
It had to be Dad, right?
well, Mom and Dad, of course,
Mhm.
both are involved in this process, but Dad was the driver of the decisions at the time, and he had a very swift backhand, and off I went to boarding school for a few years.
Okay.
You learn to internalize this and forget about this, and later on in life, when it comes into, later on when things start to stabilize and you're living out on your own, you're doing things, you need to do something about this. And this is when I came out to the world. Good news and bad news. I've had fantastic experiences, some great friends that stick around through with you. But this is there's the unfortunate downside to that. Loss of business, loss of jobs, loss of friends, loss of family. And that's the journey until finding out enough information, finding doctors that can help with hormone replacement therapy and these sorts of things, and then moving on with life. And here we find ourselves today on your couch.
You said it wasn't the time then for something like that to be discussed. I can assure you now, it's never the time, because we don't have enough information. We don't have enough information or enough willingness to accept that everyone has a right to live. We hear of stories of horrible stories of things happening to people just because they are people, nothing
Absolutely.
else. So it's never the right time, I can assure you that.
It never is, and I think education and talking about this is, and as with everything in life, the more we talk about it, the more we get it out there in the world, and the more education, the better life is. Be this finances or gender expression.
No,
and
I'm
everything
thrilled
in
you're
between.
here. I'm thrilled.
Some things are, what we believed to be true in the 80s just seem preposterous to us now. And this is the journey of us all getting better at this.
Thank you. Thank you for the profound introduction. Doc, you're here again.
Yes.
Thank you for making the time again.
Thank you.
This is Dr. Larissa Badenhorst, guys, and she was with us a few weeks ago, and now she's back. And hopefully you can give us some insights from a medical point of view. Look, when we know someone, we suck everything out of them. So we won't stop calling you for more insights. Yeah. And please tell us your background, Doc, in this subject.
Okay, so I work at My Sexual Health, and at our clinic we have a very large LGBTQIA community that we serve. We basically help them from a hormonal perspective. So to start the journey with them for gender affirming treatment. It's not hormone replacement. That sounds like a menopausal woman that we are replacing hormones for.
It's gender affirming.
Gender affirming treatment, yes. So we are affirming the gender that they identify as.
Okay, cool.
And we have a lot of patients that we see and that we walk the journey with. So it's great to have someone on the show that is walking that journey. Yeah.
I'm thrilled for both of you. And Doc, we said from a medical point of view, but you said
LGBTQIA.
Please break it down for us, because this is about information.
So it's lesbian, gay, intersex.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's LG. Oh, yeah, I just bisexual.
Okay.
Right. Trans.
Yeah.
Asexual.
Okay.
Did I miss anything?
Or
Queer.
the last last letter is an A, asexual.
Asexual.
Thank you very much.
And then queer.
And,
Yes.
cool, we'll break that down as we go along.
Yes.
So welcome, guys, and let's hope we become as, we have a friendly, not too uptight, not too super casual, highly informative
Yes.
conversation about this. And so you already told us, one of the questions we had was, when did you realize you wanted to consider transgender transition? You already told us when you did that, and you told us you grew up in Benoni, so my questions are behind your intro. Your intro was too comprehensive. What are the subtle and not so subtle things that you would say you experience in your journey up to today overall? Because I see you say loss of business, and that's very direct, and so what are the other subtle and not so subtle things that you would have experienced in the journey?
So that's a very broad question. You've got
Yeah,
there.
just touch on a few, maybe one or two.
But this is it. You go through life. How can I say? People know you as one way through your life. This may or may not be a mask, or just a need to fit into society and find a place to belong and function, to earn money, to do your thing, to be at peace. And at some point you get to a point where you have to change this expression, and you have to now go further down this journey towards becoming whole and to be in your truth. And that isn't always easy for a lot of people to understand. So you run into a few butting of heads, especially in a conservative country such as ourselves. There are businesses or ideas that sit behind the times, if you would. But it's very uncomfortable for a lot of people. And that's sadly the reality that we have to face on a daily basis. If it is from a business now trying to figure out what gender to put on their toilets, something as simple or profound as that can be, down to just the simple interactions of your everyday life.
Instead of asking you what you're comfortable with, they have a problem knowing which toilet to allocate you to. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. See, this is a difficult question. This is hard. Generally for myself, I identify as female, so I will use the ladies. But that isn't always the case. If you're in a big place, a big mall, you run the risk of making a lot of women uncomfortable by going to this loo and getting shouted at. You run the risk of getting beaten up by going to the other one.
Those are not subtle.
It can be profound for the person experiencing this, and it can be subtle for somebody else in HR who doesn't think much of this, within that business, within that building. And maybe Doc can talk towards this, but a very common ailment amongst trans people is UTIs. Just that simple fear of going to public bathrooms.
Yeah. How's that medically, Doc?
So it's basically because you don't empty your bladder often enough that you then develop infections. And it is common because obviously the fear of using another bathroom, so you'd rather just walk in the mall for 4 hours with your bladder wanting to pop, but you're just too scared of what you're going to find when you go. Yeah, so it is a common thing that we do see.
So I understand. And like with working from home, a lot of people got a lot of relief from that. I know a few friends, one has a phobia of public toilets generally, and they say because of working from home it was a relief, and because it can be a serious thing.
Sure.
And you don't just have a phobia, it's imposed upon you, and that sucks.
It's a very real threat. And for myself, a lot of my clients that come to me for electrolysis, if we look at a large group of them, a massive amount are in IT. They are remote workers. They work from home.
Yes.
This is not an accident. This is social removal.
Social positioning.
Absolutely.
So you can avoid things.
You just don't get into discussions and situations with the general workplace and an HR department. If I work from home remotely from the other side of the world.
That's a revelation.
There seems to be a lot of people who are in these remote work business.
That's very true.
I only learned
careers.
about electrolysis from you today. I admit I'm human, I learned of air. And,
It's a big word, it's hard to spell.
tell us more, tell us more. You were telling me and I found it very intriguing.
Okay, so specifically electrolysis is
Yes,
a
please.
process of removing...
In general, I just learned.
I'll
and
give you the
so
basic
thrilled
one without going into the whole consultation. But it's in general, it's a form of removing hair
Yeah.
permanently.
Yeah.
It takes a few sessions and it's very slow and tedious. It's one hair at a time. It's quite expensive, but it is permanent. And for many trans people, this is a massive gender affirming process. If it is from stopping a beard from coming out at 5 o'clock in the afternoon in a boardroom, or that blueness of dark hair coming through, to further on when we start talking about surgeries, gender affirming surgeries, it is very important that skin that might be inside never grows any hair.
You were telling me, yes.
This could lead to infections,
Yeah.
discomfort, and it's just, nobody wants that. So for a lot of surgeons, they insist that the areas get cleared with electrolysis prior. And even for other plastic surgeries, skin grafts that might move from burn victims or otherwise, whenever hair needs to be removed permanently.
There's probably ladies listening out there to find out if
Oh yeah,
they can the eyebrows.
absolutely. I do eyebrows, bikini lines, all sorts during Monday to Friday, and then I specialize in trans.
But
care
then
specifically.
fashions come and go. Now there's a fashion where you must put them back on.
Right, right.
Do we do
So
that? Can
be
we do
sure.
that? Can we reverse the?
That's a different profession to mine.
So someone else makes the
take 'em
money
off.
when they put them back.
I'm sure there is.
I mean, honestly, it's the reality of our lives.
Everyone has to make their money, right?
Yeah, I'm thrilled by that. And you were telling me that. So you just one scientific fact about this aspect of this. You remove their roots, for lack of a better word.
Yes, absolutely, and we destroy the hair follicle
Okay.
so that it cannot germinate again.
We haven't told people what is transgender.
Transgender, or to be in general, trans meaning on the other side of the Latin word, separate to cis.
Okay.
If you are male and you identify as male, you would be a cis male.
Okay.
This is a great word as opposed to common language would be a normal man.
Yeah.
What is normal? So we like to use the words cis and trans.
Yes.
And a trans is somebody who at some point feels that they are opposite to their gender assigned by birth, by another doctor during birth, or by society as a whole. And they may or may not take steps to correct that or to live along the lines of their gender, of their preference.
So even if they don't take steps, it's what they feel.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's a lot of fascinating research as to why. I'm sure this is more in the doctor levels,
Yeah,
a
but-
bit over my head, but genetics and things. There are reasons why this might occur. It's through no fault of anyone's own, but it is a pressure you imagine a pressure in your chest every day about everything underlying, every question, every conversation you have, that something's not right. And this is on a scale. Some people have it severe and some people not. Some choose to take steps early and some later on. And what level of steps? Be that hormonal assistance or surgeries or nothing at all, and anything along that spectrum.
Okay.
And I think it's also important to say there's non-binary, there's patients that also, or
Right.
people,
Sorry, Doc, I didn't
not
get that.
patients, sorry, that identify as non-binary. So we live in a, lack of better terms, a binary society, so you're either male or female, but there are people that identify as non-binary, so they don't identify fully as a male and not fully as female.
Okay, you answered one of the questions I probably wouldn't have asked, but the question here was saying transgender, transfeminine, and then the other one is transmasculine.
Yes.
Is it just transgender is the general term, transfeminine is the...
Yeah, often transgender is used as that umbrella term
Yes.
to cover the whole spectrum of everything in between. Non-binary, a-binary, transmasc, transfem, everything in between. It's a very umbrella term to say unalike, not on the same side as.
And society tends to say there's two myths, there's two wrong ways of looking at things that society does. Number one, if they consider you different, they think you're gay, and that's misinformation in society. And they consider, someone did say it recently that just because I'm gay doesn't mean I am more sexual. How do you deal with that?
I think,
I know
can I interject?
It's
I think
misconception, but
I think it's important to just differentiate that identity and sexual orientation is two different things.
and
So
sexual
gay,
tendencies
yes.
is three different things.
Yes. So gay is more your sexual orientation versus your identity.
Yes.
So you can still identify as a cis male, but your sexual orientation is that you are gay.
Okay.
So I think that's also important because I think a lot of people think that gay and trans, all of them are kind of in one umbrella, but it isn't. Sexual orientation and sexual identity is two different things. And it's also not to say that if you are gay, you're more sexual than someone that is heterosexual, for instance.
A nice way to remember that, or to think of that, the difference between sexual identity and gender identity. Gender identity is who you go to bed as. Sexual identity would be who you go to bed with. And those are different things.
And you would say sexual tendencies or sexual appetite is when you are in bed, how much of it you have.
Sure.
That's all it is.
And that's a
How much you chew on, yes.
Yeah, because at this age, I have had such a journey of self-discovery. I told you the one time, Doc, that 23 you are at the peak. 21 at 18 you impress your friends that you might have done it, and at 23 you lose count. If you are lucky enough, if that you call lucky. And you spoke of norm and normal, and we were educated as clinicians that you never say patients that I will do this for you and you look normal, because there's another thing that we must also accept that is not necessarily right all the time. People, then we were told you can say you would be under societal norm, considered this way, that way. But geez, I've realized society is more sick than we care to admit. Because just because people in your family don't understand something, it doesn't make it right for them, for their opinion to be taken as the grand opinion. Doc, you've been following our discussions.
Yes.
Any burning medical inputs you want to make into this?
No, I just think that education is key, and I think a lot of the community that I see, I always tell them I really don't believe that that a lot of people are I don't know what the English word is, but aspris when it comes to a lot of things. I think it's lack of knowledge. And I think knowledge is power. I think educating people, having shows like this, getting the word out, educating people about it is very important, because I think it's just purely a lack of knowledge, a lack of people not knowing. To ask someone if you see them, to ask them, can I use your pronoun as she? Do you prefer the pronoun they? Is it he? And I must say, working in the field does help, because I'm exposed to it, where other people, not necessarily exposed to someone that they know that is trans, might not know, simply because that's just in the community that they
Absolutely.
that
One
they
thing I
work
can
in
say
or live in.
is that knowledge is very empowering. Autism, we are expected to handle autistic kids. Autistic kids are highly gifted. I know them as highly gifted. I know them as highly sensitive. When they approach me, I approach them back, and to them, it empowers me to be able to treat autistic kids, because knowledge empowers. And also, the opposite happens. Lack of knowledge is debilitating, because it makes you have a problem with things that are actually not a problem. So the more knowledge we feed out there, the better, because people think I have a problem with this. You know, you come to a conversation on radio or wherever, people say, if my son was gay, I would have a problem. It's because you don't have knowledge. You are declaring a disability with yourself. You are having a problem with something that you shouldn't actually be having a problem with, because there's nothing wrong to have a problem with. You know, so a lack of knowledge is very disempowering. I should say it out there. So the more knowledge we get, like you say, Doc, and being in the field, the more it's so empowering to have knowledge. I can never overemphasize this. To a teenager out there, Claire, if a teenager wants to explore themselves and find out what they want to do with themselves, what's your advice? What's the approach? What must they do?
And to carry on with that same topic is to research. We fortunately today, we live in the age of the internet. They never taught us much in school about, we had sex ed class, and they just brushed the top of a few surfaces, and a couple teachers were a little uncomfortable, and it was maybe a half an hour session twice, and that's it. Luckily now we understand that there's maybe more to this. Try and find as much information as possible. This helps you find, oh yes, that rings true to me, or no, that doesn't. Let me keep looking until I find something that does relate to myself, and say that's probably me. And from a place like that, then it's a little easier to know what you're looking for. And then you find good healthcare providers, such as Dr. Larissa.
Yes.
You find people, there's the difference between doctors who read textbooks and doctors who have experience. There's a massive difference in those. We come across this a lot, and from experience, they get good care, and it's no harm. But they're reading from a textbook that was published in the 70s.
But
Find people who have
passion.
new knowledge, experience, and people are out there. If we look, the internet is big, and no one can hide it from you.
Yeah.
We just need to get to it.
Yeah.
Seek out safe places to have that discussion. Community groups, fantastic support groups such as Be True to Me. There's a great support group. Find
I didn't hear
other.
that.
There's a Facebook group. It's a transgender support group. Be True to Me.
Be true to me.
Right. And there are others. There are some that are local to areas. There's another group in Tshwane and another group in Soweto. And through these groups, you can find your peers, where you can have these discussions in a safe space and get pointed towards the right direction. That would be my advice.
Doc, you told me the other day your choice of work when we were talking about sexology. It's got nothing to do with today, but you were saying there's something that fulfills you about your work. What fulfills you about this particular aspect of your work?
I think there's two things. One is to walk the journey with my patients. Sorry, I always refer to them as my patients because I'm a doctor. So with my clients, it's nice to walk the journey with them, one. And two, I think to be part of the acceptance that they get for the first time in their life. Because I think a lot of the clients that I see, for the first time, they can actually speak to someone without being judged or thrown out of the door or shouted at, because they have chosen to deal with how they feel. And I think that's important for me, is to be able to walk that journey with someone. And whether it is how they identify, whether it is that they have another health issue, for me, I always tell them that I have to remind myself, because you obviously have to do certain screenings.
Yes.
As people go through life, and I have to literally put it in bold in my notes to remember, we have to do a prostate screening test, because I don't see a person that's male.
With a prostate.
Exactly. Like I see a female or a male, how they identify. So I literally have to write it in big bold letters in my notes just to remember to do that as part of the general health checks. But I think that's the beauty of the job, is to actually walk the journey with someone.
I'll tell you what I did today now. A lot of our questions, I made a conscious decision silently to say a lot of questions that ask, how does this affect you mentally? How does this, I'm ignoring those questions. You know why? Because if there's any mental issues out there that need to be entertained, it's not about a transgender community. It's society. We need to focus more on society, understanding what's going on. Because I don't know if you're Africans. You don't Africans?
Yeah, not myself, but
just because people
I'll
don't
follow along
understand
just
you,
fine.
She's an English Slabbert.
I'll follow along just fine.
yeah,
if you
I
want to
made
go
assumptions. I'm
Afrikaans.
from the Free State, so just because people rack your mal, I expected. Just because people find a problem with you, it doesn't mean it should rack your mal. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't mean you should respond that way. And I mean, where would you be if you spend your life trying to respond to all the adverse outlook that people have towards you? I mean, I'm ADHD, where if people find me crazy sometimes, but where would I be if I spend my time saying they are judging me? I mean, I wouldn't make progress in life, you know?
But this is exactly the problem. Trans people go through life being judged. It's obvious. It's out there all the time. We don't have a lot of good information from South Africa, but we know that the American statistic is 41% of trans people will commit suicide before the age of 30. That's a crazy number. Every other major health care problem combined doesn't come to that sort of rates. This is a societal norm, the pressure every day, the non-acceptance. It's those things that's a constant wearing on people.
What's the best
If
way
we
to
can
deal
solve that,
What's the best way to deal with it? From your
education.
perspective.
Absolutely, education. If we can get everyone to understand what it is, and that there's no threat, and that this is normal, and this is okay, and that a trans person walking down the street is no harm to you, then perhaps we can work a little towards the prejudice and discrimination.
From your
out in
own
the world.
perspective, though, what's the best way of dealing with it?
Absolutely, exactly that. I try and teach as many people as I can, as and when we come past people, and ignorance is the problem. Education is the answer.
Other than that, you psych yourself. I know how I psych myself. I say I get very weak when I see people in a position of weakness. So if I find people that may be strengthened, I focus on how to strengthen them than to focus on their weaknesses. That's why I don't like lazy people. And I don't like people that live above their means, because you're only worsening the problem. I would like us to build from where we can go forward. So with whatever skills you have, let's move. You know, that's how I work on my mental weakness. That if I can help people go with me, I focus my energy there and I forget the other stuff. You know, yeah. So how do you psych yourself?
Oh, I don't know. When I figure it out, I'll let you know.
No, don't worry.
I like yours. I might steal yours for a while and see how that works.
No, honestly, when you find someone with a problem with it, you spoke earlier and I said to you, would it be dead? Would it automatically be dead? I think if I were to be married to anybody, I'm the most rebellious person. So I'm the least conservative. I don't want to occupy a grave. I don't want. I got my own issues. So I'm the most rebellious and least conservative. So I know in my family, if one child had to say something like that, let's say they want to discuss something that's life-changing, I would be the one to discuss it with. Although I have a daughter and she blocks me out now and then. So, but if she were to discuss anything that's not conventional, I would be the first one to say, let's do it. Because I am a rebel like that. I don't like conformity. Which is why maybe I can't stay married. But that's a question for another day.
I'd love to build on that if I may.
Yes, you may.
It's not just a very liberal idea or a conservative idea. It's more of a pursuit for truth down the middle. Mm-hmm. There's a very cool analogy that I'll steal from Dr. William Powers. We know that genetically there's a particular gene, and I forget which, it's way over my head. This gene has a break in it, and we have people, so just myself, redheads, right? We know that this is a break in the gene, and this is a gene abnormality. Not all abnormality, anomaly is the more word I want to use. And people come out with red hair. Mm-hmm. It just is. It's not a thing. It doesn't harm anybody else. Everybody goes through their life with red hair. Now imagine you know someone your whole life with black hair. They've always had black hair. You've only ever known them as black hair. A few months after not seeing them for a while, you see them again with this bright red hair, growing out of their head just like that. It just is. And you ask them, listen, what's going on? I've always known you with the black hair. And they reveal to you that they've always had red hair. They've just gotten to a point where they're tired of dyeing it. Mm-hmm. To now expect that person to conform to your idea to dye their hair black again because you're uncomfortable with the fact that their hair is red is ridiculous. Mm. That break in the gene manifests itself in the population about as often as transgenders do. So the transgender gene, as the prevalence, is about the same. It's the same thing. When someone comes out to you later on, be it your child or your kid, and they say, hey, Dad, there's this thing I want to discuss with you. Think of it more as that idea of they want to stop dyeing their hair. To say to your own child, no, you must dye your hair forever on because we don't have any redheads in this family. This preposterous idea. This is the same thing. That person has always been trans. They're now just coming to a point where they want to do something about it. They're come to a point in their lives where they're okay with showing the world who they are and living with the consequences of that. That's all it is. The idea of everybody must dye their hair a certain color is preposterous.
Mm. Yeah. I'm more intrigued by you. I'm sure the conversation will show and how we're relating to this. Doc, let's talk medicine. How long does the process take? I know there's no one size fits all in this thing because we ask for different things and we experience them differently. The body changes at different rates. Biology dictates, and when you are satisfied is when you are satisfied with what's going on.
Yes, so there's no timeline to it. There are certain, shall I say, guesstimates of how long certain changes can take. And that guesstimate is anything from 1 year to 5 years to kind of get to where you are satisfied with where we are at. But it really just depends from person to person. Depends on what changes so expectations of what is coming and what is something that we can change and what is not. And I think that's kind of where to set expectations right from the start.
The person that's on the Kardashians,
Yes.
is that transgender?
Yes.
Transition, is it?
Yes.
And from male to female, what are the steps, just out of interest,
Steps to
from male to female?
okay, so
You can go a little bit biological as well,
okay,
just for
so-
information's sake.
all right. So how we basically treat or the gender affirming treatment that we use is basically estrogen, which is the
Okay.
main component of our treatment, and then in the beginning we use testosterone blockers.
Okay.
And that is after a while that is stopped because then the estrogen is high enough to naturally block the testosterone.
Okay.
The treatment does change if someone were to have surgery. But,
Let me stop you right there.
yes.
What do the two hormones do, in brief?
Okay, so
why
estrogen
and why do you block
estrogen
testosterone?
feminizes, testosterone masculinizes.
Okay.
That's
Thank you.
the
No,
the two.
I'm happy. For the audience.
Yes, so the estrogen is responsible for the feminizing effects, and then we block the testosterone to decrease the masculine effects
Okay.
of it. Yes. Obviously, one of the big changes is yes, physical, but also from a sexual perspective, which is why I say the expectations is important to chat about,
Okay.
and to find out where each client is. We don't, yes, there are certain, I hate the word guidelines, but there are certain guidelines that we use for the treatment.
Okay.
But I will never, very few of my clients will have the exact same formulas of medication, simply because it depends on how they respond, how high their levels go, and what changes are they experiencing, what do they want, what do they not want. Unfortunately, I can't make everything the way that they expect, so we try and work around it, and there are certain things like the electrolysis, for instance. So the hair growth does decrease, but the hair doesn't really go away. So that is where electrolysis comes in, because you can't permanently get rid of all of the hair, but the amount of hair that grows on the body, on the face, does decrease, but it doesn't take it away, for instance. So there are limitations to what hormones can do and what they can't.
Okay, you spoke of estrogen and testosterone blocking medication.
Yes.
Is that therapy?
So estrogen is given in, there are patches, there are gels, there are tablets, there are injectables, there are implants. So they come in different forms, in different ways, depending on what the patient's budgets are, what they can afford, what they can't. And then testosterone blockers come in tablets. And that we use mainly in the beginning. So there's two big groups of testosterone blockers that we use. One works on the kidneys, one works on the liver. And it depends where in the process we then change that to progesterone, which is just for maintenance. So progesterone is not really a testosterone blocker. It helps more with physical changes, sleeping, mood, libido, because then we naturally don't have to block the testosterone anymore.
So this is what we refer to as gender affirming therapy.
Yes.
Loosely called what hormone?
Hormone replacement
Hormone
therapy, yeah.
Okay. At any legal age at which someone is considered
allowed to.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I know the law is not always in tune with reality.
yeah, so from the Child Care Act, so every child can give consent for medical treatment from the age of 12.
Okay.
It's difficult when it comes to the trans community because there's puberty that you kind of have to work with, and your body cannot be without any hormones because that also comes with a risk from a bone density perspective especially. So we can't, there's a very fine line between depleting one hormone and not allowing another hormone to increase. So that is where a lot of times between the age of 12 and 16, there's more puberty blocking that is done, and that is done by endocrinologists.
So around 16 you say?
So around 16 we can start the gender affirming treatment. Sometimes we do start it before, depending on the child. So that's very much individualized, but from a from a guidelines perspective, again a word I don't like, between the age of 12 when they can give consent for the medical treatment to the age of 16, we tend to do puberty blocking. And most of the trans people do come out more when they are in puberty, simply because of the dysphorias that then become much more evident because of their bodies changing. So that tends to be they do maybe identify or realize that they identify as trans before, but the dysphoria becomes a lot more in the puberty because their bodies are changing.
Now we're going to break away and speak to our virologist, Dr. Bunola Mashishi, regarding COVID updates. Over to you, Doc.
So there's nothing or no evidence to suggest that you can't take your COVID-19 booster and your flu vaccine at the same time. It's shown to be safe. However, it is recommended that when you do take the two vaccines together, you use separate arms, just because obviously you might experience pain at the site of injection. So it would be better to use your two arms to get the two vaccinations.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mashishi, for forever giving us insights into COVID. Now we don't like your messages anymore because the numbers are getting higher and higher, but it's not your fault, I can reassure you. Guys, thank you for hanging out with us. We are hanging out with Claire Slabbert and Dr. Larissa Badenhorst. I can't say two African names, like long ones. I told you I'm from the Free State and I can say them, but in any case, thanks for hanging out.
Thank you.
And now we go to the end of the show, where we want to debunk one or two myths or misconceptions in society. And apparently one is that the only way to do transgender transition is through surgery, among other things. Is that always a thing, or are there other ways?
No, so the mainstay is actually the gender affirming treatment.
Okay.
The surgery is done if you can afford it.
Okay.
And that's the big hold up, I'll say, in South Africa, especially, is because of the financial constraint of it. So I would say 95% of my patients, probably none of them can go for the surgery, and it's only the 5% that can go. But that doesn't change anything in essence from a treatment perspective, or from how they identify, or how we will go about the journey in essence. The only thing that does change is if they don't have testicles anymore, then the testosterone blocking is obviously not needed anymore. But other than that, for us mainly everything stays relatively the same. For the patients, it's obviously another story, especially if there's a lot of genital dysphoria. But I do think a lot of the hormonal treatment also helps a little bit in the genital aspect of it, but that doesn't necessarily replace anything.
So both my guests today are going to give me their details for also referral purposes for when patients want to look for you. I now want you to give us details for when people want to come for electrolysis. And before that, you need to give us some reassurance about the fact that there's a spectrum. This is where we feel like a gender spectrum, where we feel like we are born male, female, and what about the spectrum?
Yes, I think I'd like to touch on two things there. Like we said in the beginning of the show, there is a spectrum. There is female, assigned female, identified as female. There's male, assigned male, identified as male.
And assigned, sorry to interrupt you, assigned and identifying are two different things.
Yes. Yes, assigned would be what some medical professional at some point wrote on your birth certificate when out you came, and they said, and they made a decision and put that on a birth certificate. That's assigned versus how you are and how you feel and what you identify as, and the entire spectrum between, from those two extremes to in the middle where both or neither, and every version along there. Nature doesn't work in black and white. We work in spectrums. There's everything
Let's start with you, Claire. If people want to interact with your electrolysis business or want to DM for social reasons where they can talk about the nation building social reasons, not the other social reasons.
They can find me at Facebook or Instagram, Electrolysis by Claire, nice and simple. And my offices are here in Fourways.
Oh, awesome. Nice. And Doc, where do they find you? Except on our website, of course, they will still find you there. Where do they find you?
Okay, so My Sexual Health, situated in Northcliffe. And then my Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Dr. Larissa Badenhorst. My website, drlarissabadenhorst.co.za or mysexualhealth.co.za.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you,
Thank
Claire. And if you want to find our guests, specialists, and everyone that's been here to grace our streets, you can go to our website where you find in the menu where it says find a doctor. Believe me, you'll find all our guests there. You can also go to social media and DM us if you get lost. Otherwise, you will find our people on Find Our Doctor. And now, if you want to advertise, we are in luck because we can accommodate people that want to advertise on our pages, whether it's YouTube or social media pages. You can use the email address at the bottom of the screen. And it's the end. I wish we could go for longer. Until next time, keep asking your doctors.